negate the bed and lie down on the floor on a mat. If we speak Sinhala, they look after us and treat us better in the hospital. So we are encouraging our children and grandchildren to study Sinhala because we don't want them to suffer like us. And that's at the heart of a lot of the justice and language issues. It's all very well doing mother tongue. But if you think your children will do better with the other national language, if you feel that you are depriving your children of their rights by not giving them that opportunity, it's a difficult call. Our research showed that the other point about intersectionality, that it's the over 60s that don't have any of the second language. So the over 60s Tamils don't have any Sinhala. And it's women more than men who don't have. So looking at those older people who require the social security services of the public service, who don't speak any of those, don't speak the national language, they are one of our main target groups. And so what we've done, it's not really clear, but we've taken gender statistics, we've taken the research that we found, this kind of research, and we've actually built it into the language learning materials. Now, an example of the materials, so I can point with this thing, can't I? An example of the materials, it's just to show you that there's Sinhala and Tamil on the page, so it's a bilingual approach in this case. But we've taken complex social inclusion ideas and we've put them into very, very basic Tamil. The Tamil in this lesson is irika, ille, have, don't have. It's mudiyam, mudiyalam, can, can't. It's vernam, vernam, mustn't, should not. So it's very simple language, but with that language we are talking about the real social, we're getting public servants to talk about the real social inclusion issues in the country. I'd like then to turn to, from those case studies, to what are some of the issues of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'd like to talk about that from a very practical point of view. The first thing is that the Sustainable Development Goals are negotiated government to government, national government to national government. There was a big flurry to get local indicators and local, or what we call subnational governments involved. But essentially it's national government to national government, just as the aid flows that way. But when we talk about local languages, these are often not the concern of the national government. And until the SDGs can be implemented at the local level, until we localize the SDGs, we cannot deal with local languages. And I think that's a very important point to remember. I'd like to give you two examples of cities that tried to localize, not necessarily for language, but for development. My first example is Dakar in Senegal. Dakar very cleverly used a bank bond underwritten by USAID and the World Bank to develop their city because there was a conflict between the capital and the national government. And although they successfully got the bond, and they're one of the very, very few cities in a developing country to have got such a bond, in the north there are lots of cities who finance their cities on bonds, but not in Senegal. And in fact, the mayor ended up being imprisoned on I think, trumped-up charges of corruption because it was such a threat to the national government that this localizing the SDGs for a healthier city was underway. The second example is from Dr. Sanya Wilson, the mayor of Koboko in northern Uganda. And as you may know, Uganda's got one of the highest populations of displaced people, third highest in the world, and I think highest in Africa. And the national government of Uganda simply said, those refugees are illegal. They shouldn't be here, so there is no money for them. And the mayor had no access to fund to look after those people. So until we can localize the financial flows of international and national development to the subnational level, again, specifically about language, there's little we can do for minorities, minority languages, when they are the majority in their locale, but not in the country. As for the Sustainable Development Goal indicators, I'd like to quote one other issue about measuring progress with the SDGs. Germany, like Denmark and some of the other countries, have agreed to use the same indicators on their own countries and populations as on themselves, as on other countries. And they found that they couldn't measure the gender equality land issue. The indicator is number of women who own land. And in the German land registry, there's no title. It doesn't say whether you're a man or a woman. So if Germany can't measure the indicators that the North are imposing on the South for success in the SDGs, then nobody can. I'm going to have to rush through this because I've had my wrap-up call. These are some of the issues in implementing language education projects in emergencies and development. I don't have time to go through that. I'm very sorry. I would like to point out one, though, that we have to think about systems, public administration, finance, to make language and development projects happen. It's not just about curriculum and goodwill and teacher training and the right sentiments. You've got to get into the public administration systems. You've got to deal with the fact that teacher training is segregated into linguistics, and you can't run a practical methodology course through a standard pre-service teacher training college. It doesn't work like that. So there are so many issues in getting into formal education systems, and when we deal with languages in emergencies, we can stay outside the formal sector. We get all these programs that work, but when you then have to transfer the work I'm doing with Syrian refugees in Turkey into their teacher training, into their classrooms, then it's a whole different ball game. Finally, what can we do about this? I think holding governments accountable. In the Netherlands, the Dutch government has signed up to the SDGs, and people get together and protest. They say, you're a signatory. Why aren't we doing more about the environment? People are mobilizing at local government level to hold their governments accountable because they are signatories to the SDGs. No other country can do it. It can only happen within, because it's a group of friends, if you like, who are signatories. There's no power over anybody else. But from within the country, the democratic processes allow people to hold their governments accountable. I think we have to speak truth to power. I think we have to say, you can't do a complex project in 18 months. You cannot. This project we're working on in Sri Lanka, we don't have people who can type all 3 languages, let alone know their methodology, can train, can develop materials, understand content and language integrating learning. The complexity of capacity demands more time, not just money budgets, but time budgets. And that's what I'd like to leave you with. We need to negotiate reasonably, professionally. If we're talking about quality, then the design of international development has to change. We need longer time, maybe less money and more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Psyche. I just want to maybe raise a couple of points here I think are especially important. One, before we get to the questions, this idea of localizing the SDGs. So often we've gone back to the EFA goals and the MDGs, and they remain national, international goals, and they're never understood by or planned for the local level. I think that's essential. The other part about being governed in a language you don't understand. It's bad enough to be educated in a language you don't understand, but then to go out and to be governed in a language in terms of justice and finance and economy, that's probably even more complicated and difficult. So the idea of actually trying to ensure that the government officials who are working with ethnic minority, linguistic minority populations can function in their language is something we don't usually think about and has to be thought about. So, now, about 10 minutes for questions. One back there. Any other? Okay. All right, one more over there. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Giagi. I'm from Malawi. I want to talk about the issue that you raised about the project by EU versus the issue of language. I believe the biggest challenge that we have with these multinational organizations or institutions is that whenever they're implementing their projects, language is never one of their priority. And what they are interested in is to see what their deliverables are. And even if it goes to the implementers or the implementing agencies on the ground, for example, when you're working with local NGOs, they don't even consider the issue of language because to them it doesn't mean anything. And for the case of Malawi, all the development discourse is in English. And what they do is what is done is simply to translate the English material into mostly Chichewa, which is a national language, so to say. But even the translated material is more foreign than local. I mean, I want to put it that way, meaning that the translation is literal. It's not localized. It's not contextualized. So now a question to you. I think you have been working with EU on such kind of projects. Having noted that, what have you done?
Why don't we have one more question and then there's one more and then we'll have that answered, please. That's a very good question. Have they got it right? So good luck. Please, yes.
Can you hear? Can you hear me? Yep. Hello, I'm Louise Courtney from the Australian Council for Educational Research. Thanks for your presentation, Saki. I'm very interested in the materials that you developed for training the Tamil Sinhalese speakers in Tamil. And I'm just curious to know about whether when you put in the educational material, which I presume highlighted some of the disparities, whether those people then felt kind of confronted and whether that might have acted as a disincentive to learning the language. Did it backfire in any way?
You want to tackle those two questions first?
Okay. I'm very glad that you are here from Malawi because it was nice that you corroborated what I said. What have I done about it? I've written the EU's policy guidance note on gender and education, and I've put language has to be in there. So I've put it into the policy guidance note. That's what I've done personally. And you have to remember that the head of EU education delegations are normally generalists, so it's only a note to them. But we did it did raise some alarm bells that there are too many generalized mainstreaming projects out there that don't deal with this technical specificness. There's a lot of bureaucracy and we're losing sight of technical expertise in these projects. But if I can link the other thing that I've done to Louise's point, developing these materials, I suppose what I've personally discovered is to get what you suggest, authentic local language into teaching materials, not this sort of weird translation from the English. is extremely difficult, and that's what we found on the Sinhala Tamil project. Because the people, the educators we were working with from the local language base didn't have the materials writing skills, really did not. And if you think about the expertise involved in writing good education materials, well, first you have to have your methodology. And then you've got to be teaching in a communicative, learner-centered, task-based, Bloom's taxonomy, critical thinking kind of way with those sorts of materials for many years before you could. And then you've got to be creative and use local contexts and local themes and weave it all together at an elementary level of language to make it all work. So it's a highly sophisticated skill, and we found that we don't have that writing capacity also in Sri Lanka. So we have had to work in a genuinely multilingual atmosphere, trying things out in English, trying things out in Sinhala, trying things out in Tamil until we get something that sounds authentic. It's an incredibly laborious process, but that's the other thing that I've done and hope to be able to write up some lessons learned for making quality materials in local languages. It is not easy. It really is not. In Ethiopia, there was a USAID project which was going to take early learning materials in one language and do it into 7 Ethiopian languages, and they gave up after one for the same reasons. But how have our Sinhalese police officers, midwives, child protection officers responded? Yes, we were more self-conscious. Are we sort of bashing our poor Sinhalese colleagues on the head? And I think you should talk to Nyani and others from the Ministry of National Integration to get their opinion as well. But we were surprised that they loved it. It's not really in your face, the statistics. The actual language practice around the inclusion issues was fun. Their main thing was, it's the first time they'd learned in a learner-centered participatory task-based way ever in their lives. They were delighted with the methodology. So the methodology was the good time, the good feeling vehicle into all of this. But where the social inclusion topics got very complex, we go into Sinhala, so it's genuinely a multilingual classroom. So the main inclusion issues, and say how to fill in the foreign employment form, or how to tell them what they must do to make a complaint to the official languages department because the signage in their hospital is misleading. Those simple tasks are in the target language. But when we talk about the real sexual harassment protection needs of people who go and work as housemaids in the Middle East, then we move the discussion into Sinhala. So there's 15 minutes at the end of the lesson where they talk deeply about these issues in Sinhala, and where nuance and including other people's opinions and disagreements can happen in a facilitated and much deeper way. So in short, we've had a massively popular response to the classes. It surprised me. I saw something which I've never seen before. I saw senior school principals and police officers blessing the feet of their young Tamil teachers at the end of the course. I found that an extraordinary accolade. But I think it's the methodology and the vitality of the learning environment and the 2 languages that made it okay.
All right, I think we'll have to stop there. We have another important speaker. Can we please welcome Psyche again? Thank her for her contribution. I think it would be an important exercise to actually look in your countries what percentage of people in a given district are of an ethnic linguistic minority or minorities, and what percentage of the local managers, administrators, and governors and police forces are. And you'll find, of course, a great big difference. The complication being a lot of the governors and administrators are rotated in and out. So even if they learn the local language, they're soon replaced by someone who doesn't know it. All right, enough from me. I'd like to introduce now the second speaker, Dr. Isabel Pefianco Martin, professor of the Department of Education in Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines. Dr. Martin is a leading figure in English language studies in the Philippines, having published in various internationally recognized publications on topics ranging from world Englishes, get the plural, world Englishes, Philippines English, English language education, English sociolinguistics, and language policy. Her most recent work is a volume she edited entitled Reconceptualizing English Education in Multilingual Settings. Dr. Martin has held leadership positions in the Linguistic Society of the Philippines and the Philippines Social Science Council. She served, especially concerned with upgrading the state of English language education in the Philippines. Martin.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And as you have heard from the introduction, I'm an English teacher. My area of expertise is English social linguistics. And from this perspective, I have been doing work on language policy and in the education domain. I've also been doing some work on the legal domain, but most of my work have been in the education domain. I realize, of course, in a conference such as this, from a certain position, English is the monster. It's that language that slays the other languages. Okay? And it's that hydra, it's described as the hydra, the nine-headed monster that's impossible to slay. And so you would probably be asking, what contribution would an English social linguist have on this issue of multilingual education? I'm sure I can see the bubbles, thought bubbles around the room. You're probably asking that, and I will go to that point later in the presentation. Oh, I have to use this. Okay. So my presentation will proceed in the following way. First, I'm going to present an overview of the MTBMLE. Took some time before we could actually say it. Mother tongue-based multilingual education policy of the Philippines, nicknamed MTBMLE. Okay, I'll talk about the current status, accomplishments, challenges, criticisms of the policy. And in this forum, actually, there are many in attendance who are very much aware of the MTBMLE policy in the Philippines. And some of them are, in fact, the movers and shakers of this policy. So I'm glad they're around. So if you have a question, they will answer for you. Okay. The second part of my presentation will be focusing on foregrounding some of the assumptions and mindsets that are implicit in the discourse of MTBMLE in the Philippines. And I will argue that these assumptions and mindsets may run counter to attaining the benefits of multilingual education. Okay? And in the end, what I hope to propose is to approach MTBMLE from the viewpoint of softening instead of sharpening linguistic boundaries in order to better accomplish the task of inclusive education. Okay. So let me now proceed with the policy itself. So MTBMLE, I think in South, no, I'm sure about this. Diane helped me with this. In Southeast Asia, the Philippines is the only country which has institutionalized and legalized, okay, multilingual education. That's right, right? Yes. Okay. So in a sense, we kind of like leading in that area. It is a national policy, institutionalized in 2009 and enacted as law in 2013. The promotion of MTBMLE and its eventual institutionalization were bolstered by the findings of a longitudinal experimental study on the use of the mother tongue in an elementary school in Lubuagan, Kalinga province. The study, which was initiated in 1998 by SIL, compared the learning outcomes of two sets of students, one taught in English and Filipino, which is our bilingual policy, and the other taught in Lilubuagan, which was the mother tongue of the community. And the study yielded significant results. The most notable being the achievement of higher test scores of students who attended classes in the mother tongue. Okay. The Lubuagan study was one of the major driving forces for Department of Education Order number 74 in 2009, which identified MTB-MLE, at that time referred to as MLE, as the fundamental education policy and program in the department in the whole stretch of formal education, including preschool and in the alternative learning system. DO 74, Series 2009, in effect ended the bilingual education policy, I'll refer to that as the BEP, that was enforced during the Marcos dictatorship in the 1970s. I'll go back to the BEP later. In 2013, the MTB-MLE policy was enacted as law through the language provision of the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, RA 10533, also known as the K-12 law, because this law expanded basic education to 13 years. Previous to that, we only had 10 years of elementary schooling. The law includes a language provision which stipulates that the use of the mother tongue as primary MOI, medium of instruction, in kindergarten and the first 3 years of elementary education, English and Filipino are to be introduced through a transition program from the 4th to the 6th grade until such time that these two languages may be used as primary MOI in secondary education. Okay. Now, the goal of MTB-MLE in the K-12 law is literacy. Okay. To do this, 12 Philippine languages were identified as mother tongues at the outset, okay, of the policy implementation, and in 2012, these 12 languages, as you can see on your screen. And then later in 2013, 7 more Philippine languages were added to the list of mother tongues in the policy. Okay. We can also see from the MTB-MLE curriculum framework that the policy is consistent with the principles of multilingual education for literacy. First, the mother tongue is offered as a subject in grades 1 to 3, focusing on the skills of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing. Second, at the same time, the mother tongue is also used as medium of instruction from kinder to grade 3. And later, the mother tongue is used to scaffold or to bridge to other languages. So the mother tongue base provides the strong foundation to learning in the basic education levels. Okay. Now, what has the policy accomplished? To fully appreciate MTB-MLE in the Philippines, we will need to look back at the bilingual education policy, which is the BEP, which preceded this MTB-MLE policy. This because it is in the context of mixed results of the bilingual education in the Philippines that the campaign to use the mother tongues as the primary MOI came about. The BEP was introduced in 1974 during the Marcos